I want to begin by giving you a little bit of background to this project, and some of you are familiar with this project. Funding was actually provided to support several English language school teams or school boards. When we say team, we're not thinking about soccer or Olympics, we're thinking about professional learning communities who would work collaboratively, initially over 1 year, but we got funding for a second year, to focus on enhancing. The initial call was their understanding and their implementation of the grade 9 applied curriculum in really ways that best meet the needs of those particular students. Also, part of the goal of that project was really to increase teachers' understanding and knowledge of that grade 9 applied curriculum. And I know it's been out for like 11 years, but we're still going back to it to see what does it say again. To be able to identify effective strategies for teaching as we implement that curriculum, as well as to foster teacher leadership in mathematics. So many different goals into this project. So in June 2014, a call went out to all school boards to submit proposals to OAME, the Ontario Association for Math Education. There were about 50 proposals or 50 applications sent in, and some tough decisions had to be made by the steering committee in terms of which to accept, and 10 school teams were accepted. And they actually were accepted. The criteria almost were sliding criteria in the sense that what we were looking for was diversity. So we wanted some schools that maybe were beginning their journey, other schools that might be well on their way. We wanted urban, suburban, rural, et cetera, et cetera. Each of those teams had to be composed of an administrator, a mathematics department head, 2 to 3 teachers of grade 9 applied, a special education teacher, and a student success teacher. And sometimes there were other kinds of combinations of that. For instance, there might not have been 3 grade 9 applied teachers within a school, so they might have submitted somebody who's supporting grade 9 applied or connected, maybe a grade 10 applied teacher. The teams met monthly from 2014 during 2014-2015 and 2015-2016 when we had the funding extended. And they were supported by having release time once a month to be able to meet. Year 1 started off with 10 school teams across Ontario from 9 different school boards. Since it was only intended to be 1 year, at the end of that year we asked which schools would like to continue in that project. Most did. I think one had another initiative that they were following, so they didn't continue in the project. And as I mentioned, they represent diversity: rural, urban, Catholic, public, et cetera, small schools, large schools, and from all across the province. Components of this research project, it really was set up as a collaborative inquiry in terms of looking at professional learning as well as looking at teaching practice. There was also a research component. So along with them meeting every month, we as a research team from the University of Ottawa were supporting them in terms of helping to provide resources. A research assistant would attend their monthly meeting to be able to answer questions, find out what resources they might need, as well as to document their process. So in other words, we're at the point now where we have 2 years of data and we're working on doing that analysis, some of which is ongoing and will be reported here, but also will be reported later in the fall in sort of a full report. But you're getting kind of the off the ground in terms of what sorts of things are we finding. And it's very interesting to look at. We look at the schools individually in terms of their progress, what they're working on, what their learning is, what they see as student learning. We also look across the teams. And one of the things that we found very interesting as we worked is at the end of the first year, each individual researcher is very focused on the kinds of things their team are doing. When we meet as a research team, we hear that they're doing some very similar things, and we also recognize that, wow, wouldn't it be great for this team to meet with this team and share what they're doing with rich tasks, and this team to meet with this team to talk about their use of technology. So at the end of the first year, we actually had a summer institute for the school teams to share that learning and to be able to talk about what one another is doing with one another, because it didn't make sense to have this all in isolation with these 10 school teams. So if you know me, you know I love fractals. So I think about this as a fractaled experience where we have each of those professional learning communities and then the broader professional learning community of networking all of those teams together. And a lot of what you'll be seeing will be You'll see some snippets of the individual teams they worked on, but you'll also be seeing workshops of teams that have designed a workshop together across teams because they were working on similar ideas, and you'll see some of those connections and similarities. So over the next 2 days, you are going to hear from researchers, you'll hear from steering committee members. Most importantly, you'll be hearing from these school teams themselves to learn about the kinds of things that they were involved in. You'll engage in ideas and practices the school team took into their classroom. You'll hear about ways in which they worked as a PLC. A lot of today is about shifts in classroom practice. What are some new classroom practices and ideas? And much of tomorrow is about how did they work as a PLC, so that you might want to think about some of the ways that they worked, some of the kinds of things that they did to promote their learning within that professional learning community. You'll hear about challenges, no doubt about it, and the possible ways that they overcame those challenges. Research that helped to support their work. So there were, after the 2 years, a variety of different resources that seemed to surface to the top as things that were helpful to them. And so you'll hear about those resources and actually get into those tomorrow. And you'll have time to work as a team to think about how are you going to actually start your own journey.